You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello everyone, today I'm joined by Rosa and Donna for a very special episode for Armistice Day, also known as Remembrance Day. Today we will be focusing on female veterans and how they are an invisible community, not often seen. And I'm really excited to have Rosa and Donna here with me. I'll let them introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Rosa. I'm a theatre practitioner based in the Northeast. And I was involved in a project called Women Warriors with a theatre company called Workie Ticket, which is a fairly new Northeast-based female-led theatre company. And due to a post-it note that the founder, Jojo Kirtley, saw at a conference about wellbeing and mental health, which said, "What about female veterans?" the project was born. And through that, I met Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna. I'm a female veteran. I'm also a therapist, but I'm involved with Workie Ticket as well as to tell part of my story as a female veteran.
Thank you, Donna, and we're really excited to have both yourself and Rosa here today. Thank you for coming in. We are going to focus a lot on Donna's story because it's a really important story to learn more about. So can I ask, first of all, Donna, what does Armistice or Remembrance Day mean to you? Why is that important?
It's that community, it's that army environment or forces environment where we're all together to remember the people that never came back from all conflicts.
That must be really hard, actually, going out together, having that camaraderie, but also losing people along the way. How have you coped with that in the past?
But learning to manage it, but learning to look after yourself and make sure that you get the support that you need. And sometimes that support recently has come for other female veterans, which hasn't always been there. Absolutely.
Can I ask, I know that I've done some research and reading, and actually I've learned that female veterans are seen as an invisible community. And I'd like to hear in your words why you think that might be.
Because female veterans don't get acknowledged. It's having served in the forces, it was, and it probably still is to a large extent, a male-dominant environment. So females get disregarded, or female veterans get disregarded.
Do you think, this could be a question for either Rosa or Donna, but when you think about the way women are seen and the way war is seen, do you feel that there might be some social constructs that make it harder for women to understand why other women would go to war? I wonder if you might have some comments, Rosa.
Absolutely. I think there's a really wide variety of perspectives and opinions on war and why countries go to war and why this country has chosen to go into the conflicts that it has. And I say chosen because in certainly in recent years, it's not as if the conflict has come onto our shores. It's this country going into other lands and other places across the world. And I think as a woman and as a human being, I ever since I was really little did not understand war. I didn't understand why people went to war and killed each other. It was just always a huge kind of mystery to me. And so for me, and I know that for my colleagues with Workie Ticket, it's similar. It's been a really fascinating project to get involved in because we had our own views on war and on why people go to war. But in some ways, we had to not put that aside, but that wasn't the key issue here. The key issue was that there were women who have been engaged in conflict, who are signing up to the armed forces, and who then go through that process, come out the other end, and are not being recognised and are not being often well enough supported. And that's really what the project was about. And through being involved in the project, we've learned so much more than most people know, because most people don't have an insight into what life is like for women veterans unless they've had some reason to, to get to know that or to be involved in that. And therefore, it's just been a constantly challenging process in terms of challenging our perspectives, challenging what we thought, and learning so much from the women that we've worked with.
It's really inspiring to hear how much you've learned yourself going through this exercise and working with the women. And actually, when you do have strong views about a particular subject, it must be hard sometimes to kind of protect or to step away from your viewpoint, but to listen more to where they're coming from. Actually, I'd like to ask you, Donna, how has the Workie Ticket Project, what has it meant to you? How has it changed your views about yourself or your past with the army?
It's empowered me, like being part of a female environment that wanted to give females a voice was really empowering, really strong. Confidence building, to be around the other veterans was great, because it hadn't happened since I'd left the forces. Haven't been in touch with maybe one or two people, but not in the sense that it has been recently. And in being involved with the Workie Ticket team, there was no I in team, there a team, and supportive. Even though we were, speaking for myself as well, it was like, I could tell my story on the phone as I did at the very beginning, or when I was working with the writer for to be able to put out what was the story. It was about knowing that they were there for support, not just to hear my story. And likewise, it was like as a bigger team, the team of Workie Ticket and as veterans, I think we all supported each other and still do.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I'm really interested in your experience in the army and how it was for you. How long were you a member of the army, and what did it feel like really being part of that?
Well, joining up, when I joined the forces, it wasn't, it was really, I won't go into all that happened before I joined up, but it was really just to get away from my environment at Glasgow. And it was a really tough experience. It wasn't what I wanted it to be.
So going in initially, what had you hoped the army would be like?
I had a vision that I would join the forces. I would have a great job, which I did. I would have lots of friends. I would have a great life. I would travel, and I could just be who I wanted to be. But sadly, it never worked out like that.
Okay, and why do you think it played out that way? What types of things happened to maybe influence the way you felt about the army as you joined, and how did your experience change?
So I had a sense of self before I joined up. I knew that I was gay, but I didn't know at the time that being gay in the forces was against regulations. You couldn't be gay in the forces, as you couldn't be pregnant in the forces. So I had to comply with regulations. But at the beginning, I thought that I would be able to go in and just be myself. I quickly learned that I couldn't do that, because there was no one else out in the army. So you had to hide yourself.
That sounds like a really difficult experience. Have you found that now it's a little bit more modern, or are the army more accepting of people who choose to be gay? Is that something that is now more welcomed, or are they still so stuck in their ways?
They've changed the regulations now. It's not about making a choice to be gay. It's about just being allowed to be yourself.
Absolutely.
And yeah, they have changed that in recent years, but at that time it was comply or get out.
So was that an experience for you where you maybe had to self-govern yourself in how you spoke or dressed or behaved? Were you given feedback regularly on this is not what we expect of you? Because I could imagine that would be very difficult to constantly feel like you're having to put blocks on yourself and your behaviour.
No, I was marched into an office and asked if I was gay.
Wow.
And because I said no, because I was afraid of the consequences, because it was either if you're gay, you're out. So you will meet somebody and you will do it quickly.
So or for you, your experience, it was actually that strict. It was very much, are you gay? And if you are, you're out of here. You're not welcome anymore.
Yeah. And for me, that was a case then that I would be going back to Glasgow, and I didn't want to go back to the environment that I strived hard to get away from.
Wow. And so this isn't an isolated incident. Many female veterans, I would expect, have been through that experience.
I would think so. I haven't met anybody else that's actually come out, so to speak, and said, but I would think there's lots of other people within the forces, not just lesbian, gay and bi, but transgender as well. And it's transgender people are starting to come out in the forces now, which is great.
It's great to hear that. It's great to hear as well that some views are shifting, and in some ways it is becoming more modern and inclusive. But then there are other army communities across the world where this still goes on. I'm really shocked actually that you've been marched into an office and asked, straight up about your sexuality and your preference of partner. I really can't believe that.
Yeah, it did happen, yeah. But to go even further than that and to be put with somebody else as well, that to go through that career and having to be forced into a situation that wasn't even on the agenda.
Absolutely. Is sexual harassment as big an issue in the army as the news might suggest, or past papers might suggest?
Going by other veterans' stories, yes, but I think maybe Rosa might want to say some more about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Anecdotally, certainly, pretty much every woman that we spoke to, in one way or another, spoke of having those kinds of experiences, especially young women signing up. So I think for a lot of young women, including Donna, from what she's just said, and from what she's told us, there's quite a rude awakening when you first arrive and start having that interaction with the authority figures, who are mostly male, not all. But even with other women, what I've also heard, which maybe people wouldn't necessarily expect, is that because of the way that the military has been in the past, certainly, and to a degree perhaps still is the case, because of the way it's structured, because of the way that power is exercised, women also can end up, in a way, oppressing other women or censoring other women, and trying to almost model that kind of masculine or male way of using power. And I think it kind of goes a little bit back to the question that you asked earlier about kind of the experience of women in the military and why women's voices have been silenced. And I think that it really, for me, is about a question of, when we talk about power, how does that include women? Because the most of the models of power that we see in the world around us today are very male-dominated models, and they're constructed for men. And then women have to find a way to fit into that. And actually, I'm interested in, how do we change that idea of power? How do we create power in a positive way that actually empowers, and that is created with and for women, not just by men that women then have to somehow survive through?
I think that's a really important point, and actually I know Rosa and I have had many conversations about this, not just relating to women, but relating to other diversity, cultures, accessibility, and just thinking about representation, who sits around the table, how decisions are made, and how power structures are created, and other groups are expected to just form or be part of them. So I think it's a really good point, especially in this case around power and power in the military. And I wonder, in terms of medical issues or healthcare or things like that, as a female army officer, do you get support for things like medical issues and things like that? Is it well supported, the healthcare provision?
Now, you mean, as opposed to then?
Well, it would be good to know about now, but also looking back, what was your experience like in the past as well?
Medically, I tended to not seek medical help. was often put down and not acknowledged again. So it was a case of just get on with it.
So is that part of that feeling of, like we were talking about power, but actually vulnerability and being weak? Is there a perceived idea that if you are not well, or you need to seek medical advice, or you may have an issue of whatever it may be, that actually maybe your superiors would know that you've been to seek medical advice, and it would put you in a position where you are vulnerable and seen as weak?
Yeah, part of that maybe been having gone out to the first Gulf. I had asthma at that time, and I was close to not being able to go out there. I really had to fight my case, and almost to the point where it was like keep quiet about what was really going on, or not being able to be deployed with the rest of the team, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And in those instances, how were you treated by your peers or other members of the army?
I very much was keeping myself to myself after what had happened. So it was, I was part of the team, but I was very isolated. I keep myself isolated to be able to get through it.
For sure. And also when you are trying to protect yourself and others from knowing who you are, I can imagine that would feel even more isolating when you're feeling lonely, you're in a dangerous situation, and you want to have friendships and you want to feel close to people and have that camaraderie, but you also want to protect yourself and not lose a position that you really value, because it's helping you in your circumstances at that time.
And when you get into a relationship that you know that it's not right, that's traumatic. You know, having experienced lots of trauma even before getting to that point, that in itself was traumatic, and then being deployed to a war zone was another traumatic experience. So that constant head battle of trying to keep yourself well and keep yourself focused, as well as trying to keep at bay the feelings of flashbacks, nightmares, trauma that goes on constantly, like a video player. Absolutely.
It's really interesting to hear your story, because trauma is so powerful, and actually the way people experience it, as you've just said, flashbacks and nightmares, reliving that can be so debilitating and cause anxiety and all sorts of different things. How have you experienced trauma? Do you find that your experience as a soldier is still impacting you today?
At the minute, actually, I've accessed what's called EMDR. I don't know if you've heard of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So at the minute, I have just had probably about 9 sessions, and I'm continue to have some more. So I know that when I start to re-experience or things come up for me, that I can access that therapy. I pay for it myself. And that's empowering as well, because I know that, it's what I need. So throughout my life, I've managed to look after myself. And I do that more now because I'm the professional that I wanted to be. As a therapist, I know that if I can take myself to the depths of my traumas, then I can sit better with other people who experience any level of depression and anxiety or trauma.
Absolutely. It's so important that you've mentioned EMDR. Actually, I've accessed that myself for PTSD, and I feel like it genuinely saved my life. It's really powerful stuff. But also some people that I've met, refugees or other, just many people who have experienced huge and painful traumas, knowing about it and how it works, and for many people who can't afford to access it, something like running and that experience of left to right movement can shift trauma as well. But I'm really interested in what you said there about you've self-funded that, and that's something I wanted to ask about. So for female veterans or any veterans, what support do you have when you leave the army? How are you looked after?
None. I had no support. I won't go into it all because we haven't got enough time to start with, but I actually accessed my GP for support to help me to get some better night's sleep. and I ended up in the mental health system for 16 years. So I'd gone from asking for some support to ended up psychotic, until I was picked up and told that, God, this medication shouldn't be on this. So I've self-funded my therapy, as I have funded my course to go and be a therapist, and I'm looking to self-fund going and being an EMDR therapist. So I'm trying to raise the funds to go and do that so that I can offer that treatment to other people, and hopefully some of them will be veterans.
I think it's really powerful what you're doing, but I am genuinely shocked that there isn't more support from the Army and for women who have been through your experiences, because regardless of how people feel about war, the fact that you have been there and served your country, I find that hugely shocking. And I would actually like to ask Rosa a bit about this now. So when you're talking to female veterans and just hearing about the experience many have had, what is it like for people coming back, and how do people get support, find homes, find a career or a trade, or just that genuine overcoming that trauma? How, when you're in that place, you really need support and you're vulnerable. So how can it be for people experiencing this?
Again, there's a big diversity of experience. For someone like Donna, I think her situation, because of some of the circumstances around it, is not unique by any means. And there is certainly a lack of support and a lack of linked up services and a lack of follow through on the part of the military. So in terms of the military really taking responsibility for the lives that have been given over to that service. I think that, people listening, there might be people listening who would go, oh, but there is support available. There is some. There are issues to do with how gender specific the support is and how much the experiences of women in particular are recognised within, as I mentioned before, a very male-dominated power structure. Men too are suffering. Men too, as we know, experience PTSD, experience all kinds of difficulties coming back from service and trying to reintegrate into civilian life. And the women that we have talked with through this project have almost all, even those who say that generally their military service was a fairly positive experience, have almost all in one way or another talked of issues of reintegration. And I think something that really struck me that I hadn't by any means realised before this project was the impact that joining up when you're 17 years old or 16 or 18 or 19 even, so young, you've not had a lot of life experience yet. You've probably or possibly not had to live alone, not had to pay bills, not had to be responsible really for yourself. And you haven't really necessarily had a chance to develop that sense of yourself, your identity as an independent person. And you go into a structure which is very structured and hierarchical, and which essentially doesn't, although you have responsibilities, of course, it's all with reference to that structure. And your life is structured through that. And therefore, suddenly, when you leave, suddenly you have to become someone who knows how to do all of this stuff, how to access benefits or how to pay your bills and how to manage your finances and all of those kinds of things. And those are just the kind of more concrete things, never mind the interpersonal stuff, the social aspects, relationships, all of those kinds of other far more complicated things in some ways. So if you imagine a little bit like Donna was alluding to, it's so much to manage all at once, your physical circumstances as well as your emotional well-being. And the least that the systems could do is actually create a better bridge for people coming out of that military service so that there's some linked up sense of understanding of what people have been through. Because if you are being treated just like any other civilian without dealing with people who have some understanding of where you're coming from, then it feels like, from what I've heard from the women, you've got to tell your story over and over again. You've got to explain who you are all over and over again. You have to somehow get across to people who might have no idea what being a veteran is like, what having served in the military is like, the kinds of challenges that might be presenting. You have to somehow get that across to somebody in seeking help. And in a way, why should people have to do that? You know, should there not be a way that the military helps create that bridge back into everyday life for people?
Absolutely.
I was going to say, first of all, they have to acknowledge that there is female veterans, don't they? And females' experiences as veterans, as soldiers, because we are first and foremost soldiers before our trade. But there's some comments made by other professionals when you do come out and try to seek support as to, well, it's not like you actually experienced anything, is it? So comments like that are unhelpful and don't acknowledge a female's experience.
I'm just hugely shocked that this is your experience, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to share with us. And what you're saying there about actually acknowledging that female veterans exist, I mean, that's horrifying, because we know they exist. We know that there are many female soldiers and veterans. And I'm also thinking to myself, you know, the army has such a duty of care to the people that are working for them, but also going into extremely dangerous situations and putting their lives on the line for their country, for society, for all of these things. And hearing about your experience coming out of that is really sad. I am interested as well, you know, organizations like Help for Heroes, do they have provision for female veterans, or is it mainly male focused again?
I've had no experience with Help for Heroes.
Okay.
Or the only organisations I've had experience of are Royal British Legion, Finco, because Finco's a local northeast organisation, Sport and Force, which is a local, well, there's charity, and they're based in Darlington, and they're SAFA I know of. I've had no support through SAFA, so no, I've had very limited support, and the support's very limited as well. It tends to be on a bigger scale, and if you know the support, then you can access it.
But I think as well that comes into that, once again, considering all of the other elements, like we talk about this with privilege, and privilege can come across in many ways, but actually having the access and knowing where to get help, what organisations exist. Are you feeling okay to go and access them? Can you get there? You know, is it within your area and your reach? Do you have the finances to get you there? Do you have that emotional resilience on that particular day to make that appointment? And actually telling your story over and over again would really trigger that trauma and that reliving it, I would expect. I don't know, has that been your experience?
Well, it's really hard, yeah. It's really hard to tell people your story when they don't believe it. You know, for a lot of people, or certainly for other professionals, and in a particular professional, you know, it's like a question that I raised was, well, how do I know that I'm gay? When the response, well, you can't be gay because you've got kids. So professionals' lack of understanding is massive as well. There's a whole host of education needed around female veterans and what their experience is. And thankfully, Workie Ticket and the team at Workie Ticket have started that process.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that these conversations and that this dialogue is happening. And actually, I think as well as there being education required for about female veterans and their experience, actually more education around homosexuality, I think it's really important. And the reason I say that is I'm just thinking back through this interview myself. I chose to use the words choose to be gay, and actually I know you did correct me on that, and just thinking of how I think or phrase things, and we all have programming, you know, through society of how we perceive the world and how things happen in the world, but actually that isn't right. You know, it's about being yourself, and I apologize for myself and my lack of understanding there as well.
It's awareness though, isn't it? We can say things without even knowing that we're saying it.
Absolutely.
But if we choose not to change it, then we're making that choice.
Exactly.
Like we choose to be homophobic and transphobic. We don't, you know, that's a choice.
Absolutely. I think as well, it's through these stories, through sharing. I mean, this podcast anyway, I learned so much every episode, but actually having the openness to have those conversations and admit or ask for help sometimes, you know, about particular issues or circumstances, which is why it's really, really nice to hear your perspective, but also sad. I am genuinely shocked at the lack of provision. My understanding, or my kind of presumption, would be that when people leave the army, they are given access to support. They are maybe reintegrated into society through workshops or training, or, you know, this is how you claim benefits. This is how you look after yourself, and you some resilience training, or you know, this is how you can fundraise for yourself, or this is, you know. So my understanding is very far from what I'm hearing, and I don't know where that presumption came from. For me, I think it was just, to me, that seems like common sense that they would do that. So I'm really, really shocked that that's not the case.
Maybe that's that idea of the army lifestyle, isn't it? We're going to join up, we're going to have a great time, we're going to travel, we'll come out and live the rest of your life. You know, but when you have all them experiences in the forces, and they tend to take the male side, particularly domestic violence. You know, you experience domestic violence in the forces, then it's from personal experience, it's covered up, and it's quickly dealt with. So yeah, it's all very male dominated environment, and the issues that are experienced within it, they try and cover all that up as well, from personal experience.
I feel that that would be really painful, actually, to go through that experience and be told that your word is not valid, or your experience doesn't matter, and actually that feeling of being covered up just makes it feel like you are not valued, or your story or your experience is not valued, and that sounds really hard. Actually, I wonder what you might like to comment on that, Rosa, on the experiences that you've heard.
Sure. I mean, I think from what I understand, things are getting better. I think there is starting to be more acknowledgement and more support available, and various kind of different kinds of approaches. So looking at alternatives like EMDR and like different kind of rehabilitation programs and things like that. I just think there's still quite a long way to go, especially in terms of recognising female veterans in particular. We worked with a charity based in the Northeast called Forward Assist, which has a specific programme for women called Salute Her. And as far as we're aware, that's the only gender-specific charity in the UK working to support women who are leaving the military or who have left the military. And they are, you know, as you can imagine, probably massively overstretched. But as you also mentioned, accessibility is an issue. So, you know, they're based in Northumberland. It's not always easy for everyone to get there. They can't cover the whole region. They're still very small. And, you know, there should be that kind of thing all over the country, because there are female veterans all over the country. And I think that in terms of projects like this one that we've done, we ran forum theatre workshops with the women veterans who came along, who chose to get involved. Initially, there were a couple of kind of conversation style workshops which Jojo led, and they were just starting to kind of bring different stimulus. So, for example, looking at historical figures and saying, what does a woman warrior look like? What makes a woman warrior? And not necessarily just looking at kind of the military idea of warrior, but what does the word warrior mean? And looking at kind of different things that might trigger memories or emotions and things like that. And what we were really overcome with really was how open the women were, how open the women veterans that came along to these sessions were. We thought it was going to be a real struggle to get them talking. We thought, oh God, here's this theatre company coming along wanting you to, you know, talk about your experience, and that women would feel very would find it difficult to open up. And actually it was as if you just opened a door and it came flooding out. Like, they were like literally going, have you got your hankies ready? Because we're ready. You know, we're ready to talk. We're ready to tell our stories. And so it was incredibly humbling. Like, we've met some incredible people, Donna being one of them. She's a huge inspiration to me personally, to be honest. I think she's an incredible person and I have huge respect for her. And every one of the women that has been engaged in this project, in their, each of them have quite different stories, but incredible characters, incredible experiences. And I love to see kind of what they're doing, with themselves, with their lives these days, and how they are coming through the experiences that they are. And the workshops, the Forum Theatre workshops, were really fascinating. We learned so much from the women, and then writers came to some of the workshops and also were able to access audio recordings of the workshops, and that all of that material and interviews as well. So in Donna's case, she was working with one specific writer and who interviewed and talked with her, and that was then the basis of the play that was based on Donna's story, Donna's experience. In other cases, the other short plays were based on kind of an amalgamation of the women's experiences, but very much based on what the women told us. So as much as possible, it was based on a lot of fact and a lot of the truths that the women were sharing with us. And I think both the rehearsed reading, which happened back in July at the Great North Museum, and the final production, which happened on the 9th of October at the Exchange in North Shields, were incredible moments, really, of a sense of bearing witness together, a sense of the veterans and us as a theatre company and the actors and the other people who had, for all of their own reasons, come and attended that event. Just a feeling of being together and saying, yeah, these women exist, they're here, they're fighting, they are making their voices heard, and we're there with them. And finally, they're getting some recognition.
And it's so important, and just hearing that and how powerful it's been is incredible. And I'm so glad that is there, that provision is there, hearing how actually theatre can really help in this instance to support and nurture and give that sense of solidarity. We're out of time now, so I'm really sorry to say that, but I'm really inspired by this conversation and hearing your strength, Donna, and your courage in difficult times. It's really powerful. May I ask before we go, I'd like to ask you both, what is your number one word that helps you to nurture your zest, so helps you to overcome difficult challenges and find your way back to yourself, to who you are? So for you, Donna, is there one word that has changed your life or helped you in your journey?
It's a statement, really. You can't change people and you can't change situations, but you can change how you respond. That's
very true. Very powerful and very deep, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm a therapist.
It's part of who you are. Yeah. And what about for you, Rosa?
For me, I think there's two words. One is hope. I think if I didn't have hope that we are able to have an impact in whatever way, in the smallest ways and in big ways, but that we as human beings have the power, the capacity to actually have an impact on things and to change things, I would struggle to get up every day if I didn't have that hope. And so that hope isn't founded on kind of a fluffy idea. It's actually, you have to find it in actions. So it's hope that has to be created by your actions every day. And the other thing for me is music and dancing. So whenever I have moments of feeling a bit rubbish or feeling like I'm in difficult times, I stick some music on and I dance, and that just helps me kind of come back to myself. Or going out into nature, like I love to do that, go and look at the sea or be in trees. So those kinds of things about bringing yourself back to some of your own essence, I guess, is what helps me in those days.
Very important. Thank you for sharing that. I have actually seen Rosa in action on the dance floor and she is incredible. But yes, thank you so much for coming today and for your strength.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.